Hello everyone. Recently, as I was working on my game, I needed to create some textures. So I started looking for software to create the textures, and while I was searching, I found this awesome tool called Material Maker. So in this video, I'll be checking it out. I found the great thing about Material Maker is that it has a lot of functionality. It's non-destructive. You can export to Blender, Godot, on Unity or Unreal. By the way, it's also made in Godot. And the most important thing, it's free. Unlike Substance Designer, which costs a lot of money. With Material Maker, you can create all kinds of textures and materials that are used for texturing 3D models or creating VFX textures. So, to test Material Maker, I decided to try to make some textures and then use those textures to create simple scene where I'll be showcasing the textures and materials. Let's start with a quick overview of Material Maker. Here in this left panel, we have all of the nodes that we'll be using to create the textures. On the right, I've set up a Preview 3D, which shows a 3D object, and here I have a Preview 2D, which will be displaying textures in 2D. In the main window, if you right click, you get a little box which displays also all of the nodes, but you get a search bar, and now if we search gradient, and if we click, we get the gradient node, and if I connect that to the albedo, we get a gradient on our cube. I would like now to change this from a cube to a plane, and also change its UV scale from 4 to 1. Now that we had a quick overview of Material Maker, I'll start by creating a simple texture. We'll be making dust or smoke particle, and for that I will be right clicking and choosing the shape node. I'll change it from polygon to circle. I will drag from this, and if we let go, we get the same menu. I'll be writing warp, and as you can see here in the bottom right, it displays the current selected node, its texture, and if we click on the warp node, you see nothing happens. That's because we didn't connect a height map, and for this I'll be using a noise, which will be a noise node called FBM noise, and I'll be changing this from value to simplex. And now if we click this, we can see that our circle is being warped by this noise. Now play around with the values until we get something that's more like dust or smoke. There we go. And finally, if we go to circle, as you can see, if we drag this parameter, we can see our circle is beginning to get a gradient. And if I type here, for example, 7, 5, we get a bigger gradient. And now if we click, now it looks more like smoke, like dust. And if we connect this now into our albedo, it will display this particle on our texture. Now if we want to quickly stylize it, we can just drag here, do a quantize. You can do this many different ways, but maybe this is something you're going for. We don't know, but I will not be doing that. But I would also like to show something else. So before we do that, let's explain how to export the material. If you go into File, you have a Export Material, and you can choose Blender, Godot, Unity, or Unreal. Today I'll be using Godot, so I will go to Godot and choose Godot. And when you click that, you can choose your project and export directly in your project. But before I do that, I will also like to show you that there's a special node, an export node. And anything that is connected to this will also export with our material. So this way we get two different ones. And here you can change the quality. Basically now it's a 2K texture, and this suffix is important. Basically it will name it whatever you name it plus this suffix. So now when I export, I will be getting this material and this texture. For the second texture, I will be making a lightning bolt. I want this lightning bolt to be more stylized than our previous texture. So let's get started with a simple shape node. I will be changing the size from 6 to 4. If we click now, we get a square. Now I will be going into a transform node. This node lets us transform anything that we connect to it. I will be changing the scale from 1 to 0.2 and also the scale on Y to 10. So we expanded past these borders. Now I want some variation along our rectangle, so I will be adding some noise to the scale X here in this scale map X, and I'll be choosing a simplex node here. Now we get a more interesting looking lightning bolt, but it doesn't look quite like a lightning bolt unless this is something you're going for. So I will also add another form of noise. I'll be adding a warp. Then I'll be going into an FBM and I'll be choosing a simplex noise again. Then I will play around with these values until I get something that looks more like a lightning bolt. Something like this. This parameter here lets us choose if we want this to be thicker or thinner. So I'll be going for something more thinner. Something like this. Now I will also like to add some glare around the lightning bolt. To do that, I will be going into a dilate node. And this basically lets us dilate our texture. Now this is a bit too much, so I will reduce it. It doesn't look that good. I will also try to blur it so we get something more uniform. There we go. And now I will blend these two and choose a screen blend and up this to 1. Now I will also like to color this so we can see some color just to see how it works. I will be choosing a light blue color, and now if we plug it, we'll see something that looks more like a lightning bolt. Now I also like to add some emission. I will connect this one to the emission, and now we get something that looks more like a lightning bolt. We can play around with our values if we want more blur, more glare, but I think this is pretty good. Also, I would like to change the alpha on this one to something more transparent. If you want to export this and use in other software as well, I will be exporting both of them. Changing the texture to 2K texture. And I will be naming these alpha cut. Also, first of all, let's add background or glare, and here I'll be doing lightning alpha cut. Now we can export this texture and we have a lightning bolt. Now for the third texture, I would like to make a cracked ground texture. So basically if we have like an impact and you want to show the force of that impact to make it look like the ground cracked from that impact, we need to create a cracked ground texture. And to do this, it's very simple. We just get a Voronoi noise, as you can see here. Now I will be dragging its borders into a colorize and swap the texture, and basically now we get the borders on. And now I will be plugging this into the albedo, and to get some kind of sense how this would look, first of all I will need to explain what the other fields do. The first one is the metallic. Basically, if you want to make some object have metallic properties, you plug a texture into the metallic one. Same thing for the roughness. Emission, we already saw it. Basically, texture then emits. The normal is the light source, how it hits, how the light should react. Ambient occlusion is shadows, basically where the light cannot hit. Depth is depth. Transparency, if the texture is transparent. And subsurface scattering is subsurface scattering, basically if you have like skin, and to show how much of it is subsurface scattered. But that's for another day. And now I will plug this into the depth, and as you can see here, where it's white, we added depth. So basically where you have white, it adds depth. You can now change this if you want to make it more circular using a circle map. As you can see here, I will increase the radius to 1.5 to make it expand past the borders, and increase the repeat from 1 to 2. And now if we do the same thing, we get a cracked ground that's in a circular manner. So this is one of the textures that we can export. But also I would like to export another texture, and this texture we'll be making it now. But first of all, I will be adding a colorize into the depth. Occlusion node, this is a special one, is you just plug it into the occlusion. A normal map into the normal map, and that's it for now. So now let's get started. Now we have the borders, but I would like to get, this will be the plane, basically the rocks in this case, so I would invert it. Now I have just the planes, so basically where it's white is what the texture we're getting. I will be going into a fill texture. This texture, sorry, I needed to plug this one. That's how a fill texture works. This basically just grabs and fills the elements by their borders. So I will be upping this to 512 also, because I want to add some variations, because now they're plain, and as you can see it's a little boring. So I will add to make them look more like stylized rocks. I will be blending this with this fill, which we can add some variation by going into a gradient node. And now if we see, we get a different gradient on each of these planes. I will be increasing the layers to something like 20, and I'll be playing around with this. There's something that looks a little better. And I'll be plugging this into the blend node of this, change this to darken, and now you can play around with the values to basically darken it or not. So now that we did this, I would also need to blur this because now we get these jagged edges. Basically they're not anti-laced, so I will need to use a blur node. You can just use a blur node and decrease this to maybe like 10, and now you see we don't get any jagged edges, so it doesn't look weird. And one more thing, because I want all of them, they're all the same color now, and I want them to have a different color. This can be done easily by just dragging the same fill node into going to a random gray. And you can see now they're all randomly gray color. I will be also blurring this because there's also jagged edges here. Also 10, it's enough. And if we go now, they're not there anymore. So I will be plugging this here. Let's just see how it looks now. Also, I need to invert this because we inverted it earlier. And there we go. As you can see, now they look more interesting. They're not just, they have variation. I'll increase this to 2K texture. Why not? I will colorize this. So this will be the color of our rocks. I will pick something like bluish gray. Something like this is good enough. But first of all, forgot to multiply. Now they'll be the same color as you can see now, but if I multiply this, and you can play around with the value, and now if I plug it into this, now you can see they're all different color. And if I plug this in here, you can see they're all, some are lighter, some are darker. You can play around with this, that's up to you, however you want. And also I would like to make it look like there's lava here beneath from the impact, like we cracked the ground and now there's flowing lava. And to do this, it's very simple. We're going for a simple stylized look, and to do this, I'm just gonna grab this one from here, colorize it, change it to red, blend these two together, choose screen, and there we go. And that's it for this texture. You can play around with the values. You can choose how much you want to take away here, add more, it's up to you. You can add different levels, layers, that's all up to you. And that's all for this texture. I would like to say in the future maybe I'll make more complex ones if that's something you want to see. I also would like to make some VFX tutorials and maybe try to create some fun VFX. And yeah, and now that I made these textures, I would like to show them, maybe make some simple VFX animation. Now I've quickly made a scene where I'll show what we made today. I made a little VFX animation and also our ground plane that we made, our rocky lava ground plane. But before I show that, I would like to say if you enjoyed what you saw today, please subscribe. It helps a lot. I also stream on Twitch, so if you would like to watch me program my video game that I'm working on, please follow and watch my channel. And please leave a comment down in the telling me what should I make next. So now, without any further ado, I see a little button here waving, and there it is. It's the subscribe button. So if you would like, we can press it together if this is something you enjoyed. So in 3 seconds, I'll count down. We can press it together and see what happens. 3, 2, 1. Wow. I got fireworks. I don't know about you, but I got fireworks. So, yeah. So please subscribe again. Thank you for it helps a lot. Thank you for watching this video. But now let's get back to the animation we made. And here I'll just let it play and tell you what we did. This is the lightning bolt we made. That is the ground texture that we made. I also added some blur to it. And yeah, there it is. Thank you for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.